pardon me 1 second. Had something pop up. Okay, there we go. Beth Scarborough from the University of North Carolina at Charlotte will be describing her article, Beyond the Myths, the American Civil War in History and Memory. And Jessica Kohout Tailor and Lili Klar from Clemson University will be talking about their article entitled Growing Collaborative Outreach Efforts to Support the Well-Being of Communities. So without further ado, I would like to enable our panelists to provide a brief description of their article and talk about some of the features they'd like to underscore to our attendees as well as our other panelists. And I'm just going to start things off by asking if Erik would be able to speak about his article and talk about some of the features of the research that they would like to share with all of us today.
All right, great. Thank you. Thank you, Matt and Mara and Sarah for this opportunity to talk today and for the inaugural issue of the journal. So we're really excited to be part of it and to contribute to it. So I am Erik Moore. I am the head of the University of Minnesota Archives. I'm also co-director of our institutional repository, which we refer to as the Digital Conservancy. And I'm a co-author on this article, along with Valerie Collins, who is our digital repositories and records archivist. Valerie, in that role, also serves as our kind of operations manager for day-to-day activities for our institutional repository. And then the third co-author is Lisa Johnston. She is the co-director along with me for the institutional repository. And Lisa oversees data curation, data management. She's the lead for those areas and on our campus. So we wrote this article based on several conversations that we've been having, a couple different presentations that we've given over the years, really looking at this question of the intersection of library programs and our public engagement mission at the university, and how does the activities of the libraries support public engagement and beyond our own library and in concert with the university itself. And so we started to look at our institutional repository. And our institutional repository first launched in 2007, and it is I won't say different than other institutional repositories, but from the very beginning, we had a particular focus of our repository to look at the works that were created on campus. Not just to kind of focus or think about the repository as like a green or an open access way for faculty to deliver their scholarship in alternative means other than through publisher websites or subscriptions. I mean, of course, all of that is there and people make use of the repository in those ways. But our focus was really looking at all of the work, all of the research done at the university that is not published elsewhere and does not live in other places, and maybe might be content that might eventually come to the university archives. It might be content that only lives on a university website, and how do we capture and preserve and make available that content for the long term? And so that was really a focus for the IR. And over time, we started to see the campus partners who we were working with and these offices and programs and departments, we started to see some commonalities, especially for those that were really big contributors or really involved. And we started to see that those departments and those programs really had public engagement and public outreach as a major portion of their own focus and their own mission. And so it made sense for us to start working more closely with them to provide access points to these materials that were open access, that were we were going to apply preservation to and ensure their availability, because they themselves were posting them on their websites and pointing to them, and then the website would change because there was either a reorganization of the website or a new Drupal platform was put underneath, and all of a sudden they were told they had to move all their PDFs off of their site, and and so for them it became just this constant kind of keep up system, having to keep their documents updated and linked and available. Whereas working with us, we were able to provide that more permanent and persistent location. So it became a real natural collaboration. We were able to provide what we've kind of come to term as a common good solution for them, and it took that out of their need and a worry away from them. And so and the article also really tries to focus on that idea of what is an engaged campus and how do the libraries support an engaged campus. And an engaged campus takes a look at public engagement through a lens of the mutually beneficial relationship that happens in public engagement. So it's not a one-way outreach. It's much more about the partnerships that are developed with people in our communities and people who are working with these other organizations. And we make sure to say that the repository is not the catalyst for all of this, but rather it's part of the overall program that we can offer people. So that's kind of the background of the article, the kind of thought process we had when we were putting it together. We provide a couple of specific examples of different programs that we've worked with, a couple of the different approaches that we used with them. There's kind of two levels of outreach in this article. There's the outreach from us as the repository program to a department on campus working together. And then there's the outreach and public engagement of this program plus the repository and the work that we provide and assist with the community. So it's that latter one that we believe is kind of we have some new insights and new things to offer and talk about based on kind of our own literature review. But that formal one, that kind of internal, we do provide some examples, we provide some references and citations for others. And we could have certainly written an entire article just on that kind of concept, but we wanted to write this other piece about it supporting the larger university mission. So that's kind of my overview. That's my introduction, and I'm happy to turn it back over to Matthew or whoever might be up next.
Great, thank you for that very informative description of your article, and we're very pleased to be able to publish it. We'd like to now turn to Renee and Kelly, if you would like to talk about your article and share it with our other panelists as well as our participants.
My name is Kelly Safin. I'm a reference and public services librarian at Milstein Library, which is at the University of Pittsburgh at Greensburg. So we're about 40 minutes away, give or take, from the main campus in Pittsburgh.
And I'm Renee Kiner, a public services librarian at Milstein Library. So basically, our article was really just how we created a faculty recognition event on our campus. There wasn't one before. And about a year and a half after I started going to a lot of faculty senate meetings or committee meetings. And I was kind of hearing the same thing from faculty, which is, iterations of, we don't have a lot of faculty recognition on our campus. We don't really celebrate when things get published or we have books written. We don't really talk about what we do for the community. So I had brought the idea to Kelly originally and said, you know, hey, what do you think about us creating a faculty recognition event that would be put together by the library that would actually help a lot of those faculty's complaints. And Kelly really liked the idea. So we started kind of figuring out some, you know, how we would do it. And then we brought it to our director. And she very much liked the idea. So there was a lot of, because we were starting this from scratch, there was a lot of things that we had to think about and try to figure out, which was a lot of what the article was about. Kind of some things that we were not expecting, which Kelly, if you want to talk a little bit about that.
So like Renee said, this was very much from scratch, and we have a mix of faculty on our campus. We have 3 main divisions or departments, and some are very prolific in their research and they're also very eager to talk about it, and others maybe not so much. So we relied on information from the division chairs whenever they did the reviews of the faculty and the faculty provided their information. Our VPAA, our Vice President Academic Affairs, she suggested that would be a good way for us to get the information. So the division chairs provided the information and we then compiled it. So we were relying on them rather than the faculty to provide the information. And one of the biggest hurdles in our first year was that one of the division chairs requested that their faculty provide the information to us. And this was over the summer, which is not a great time to reach people. I'm sure some of you are aware. They're doing their own research, they're traveling, and this was a new event. So it wasn't like it was immediately recognizable to them and like, oh, I need to do this right away. So that was a little bit of a hurdle, but it's wonderful that we can report that after that first year, we were able to get buy-in from all of the division chairs after that to get all their information. So we basically had a display of, and the article talks about this, of not just publishing and presentations, but also committee work in the community and in their different fields. And basically the different collaborations that had to happen for us to do this on our campus and what we learned from it and what we're continuing to do. And Renee, if you want to talk about what we're doing now.
Oh, yeah. So because of COVID, we are not on our campus. We have a very limited amount of faculty that are actually teaching on campus, and the librarians have been working from home this whole time. So we had to try to figure out how we would event and get the information out to people. So we did ask for information back in June, and we were provided it, and we ended up just doing a guide. Which, you know, we can always throw into the chat if anybody's interested in viewing it. But we got our president, our campus president, to record himself speaking. So there's a really nice short video of him talking about the importance of this and you know, why they should continue to do their research and why it's important. And then our VPAA, she did not do a video, but she provided some information as well. So there's a little blurb from her. Everything that's kind of on a tab would normally be on a poster in the library. But we did actually get feedback that most of the faculty really like this LibGuide. So we may end up doing the in-person and this LibGuide at the time next year.
And we don't have any food for this year's event, which everyone's really disappointed about, but this does give you an idea of the kind of information that we captured. And we did find students really appreciated knowing about this too. We would put the information up afterwards so that people in the library could, you know, walk around and see it. And we did see students doing that. And, oh, look, there's my professor, look what they did. That's really neat. And that's important to students, we found in our research, because it gives credibility, even more credibility to their instructors. So we thought that was a nice thing to do as well. And we're really appreciative of the opportunity to share this with you. And thank you to all of the folks at the Journal for this opportunity. That's all from us.
Thank you very much. With that, I'd like to invite Beth Scarborough to talk about her article.
Sorry about that. I'm Beth Scarborough. I'm Instruction and Information Literacy Librarian at UNC Charlotte. And Susan Perdue and I are honored to be a part of this panel and to have an article in the inaugural edition of the Journal of Library Outreach and Engagement. In our article, we talk about a series of programs that our library, along with the Department of History and the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Library, put together in 2019 to address myths and to bring forth the truth about the Confederacy and Confederate monuments, particularly in North Carolina. And the impetus for the project was driven in large part by the church shooting in Charleston, South Carolina in 2015, and the subsequent controversy over Confederate monuments, particularly the case of Silent Sam, which was a Confederate monument that was at that time on the main part of campus at UNC Chapel Hill. So we formed a committee and submitted a grant proposal to LSTA to cover speaker fees for what we knew from the very beginning had to be a series and not just one program. But that grant proposal was rejected, but we never gave up. We knew this was an important topic, and we really didn't see where it was being discussed publicly. Maybe it was in other parts of North Carolina. We didn't see it from our perspective or in Charlotte. So we knew this program or this project had to be open to the public. And so we partnered with Charlotte-Mecklenburg Library's Sugar Creek branch. Then in 2017, at a Charlottesville, Virginia white supremacist rally, a counter-protester was killed. The need for the discussion became even more important. Our Dean, Ann Cooper Moore, helped keep the topic on the minds of staff, and she even brought it to the attention of a newly formed board of advisors. One of the board members with grant writing expertise took interest, and then we were then able to get support from a prominent member of our history department. And we submitted a revised grant proposal to our school's Chancellor's Diversity Challenge Fund. So we received enough money to host two large events, one which kicked off the series by having the noted authority on North Carolina during the Confederacy, Dr. Paul Escott, speak. And our culminating event was a panel presentation led by Karen Cox. She's a UNC Charlotte professor of history and the authority on the United Daughters of the Confederacy. The United Daughters of the Confederacy had a huge influence on the perpetuation of the lost cause myth, and they were responsible for a great number of Confederate monuments being erected in the early 20th century throughout the South. Dr. Cox enlisted the help of Dr. Hillary Green of the University of Alabama and Dr. William Sturkey of UNC Chapel Hill for the panel presentation. The project included two genealogy events, one with an African-American focus and one with a North Carolina focus. And Charlotte-Mecklenburg Library hosted a film screening of the 2016 movie, A Free State of Jones. And they had a commentary by the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Library historian. Our goal was to have a public discussion about these issues, which were in the news and on the minds of the people of North Carolina. The monuments issue was highly debated at the time, and the North Carolina legislature had even passed a bill preventing the removal of monuments, except in cases of public safety. Was this something a library should have taken on? We didn't see where it was being discussed, as I said. Ultimately, we believed that as a place of higher education and a public institution, it was worthy of sponsorship and our responsibility and an example of critical librarianship. We had a successful turnout for the events. and Drs. Cox, Green, and Sturkey landed a spot on a local public talk radio show, which led to greater interest in the program. The evaluations were positive, and the events brought our library to the attention of many members of the public. And as a public institution, this has been a mission for our university and our library. Our library is very active. We have hosted many programs dealing with social and timely issues, several this year, including a very popular program on misinformation and news journalism. I see this continuing in many ways. Outreach to more people is further possible through virtual programming. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Beth. And last, to speak about their article would be Jessica and Lili.
Hi, I'm Jessica Kohout Tailor. I am the undergraduate experience librarian for Clemson Libraries here in South Carolina, and I'll let my co-author introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Lili Klar, and I'm a library specialist with the Information and Research Services Unit.
So kind of the impetus for our work getting together and us wanting to share our experiences, which we're really excited to do this through this panel today, and also just have our experiences shared in the inaugural journal, was really that we came from similar but different backgrounds in libraries. So we had some overlap in our job, and we were both kind of new to academic libraries. And I'm coming from a K-12 school librarian perspective, that I was in that system for about 7 years before moving to academic librarianship. We came together and talked about how we could support our students and their well-being. And Lili, do you want to talk about your prior experiences and kind of what we did to start I guess, supporting students?
Yes, so prior to joining Clemson Libraries, I worked at a local public library just in the next town here. And when Jessica and I met, we realized that our functions here overlapped, and there wasn't an outreach committee or anyone dedicated to outreach here at Clemson Libraries. So when we realized that we had to create events to engage students, we thought it would be a good opportunity to collaborate. So I think one of the first opportunities that came up was prior to exam week. We decided that hosting a de-stressing event would be good because our library is typically very busy. It's the hub of campus, and a lot of students are inside the building studying and working through the night. You know, we're open 24/7 around exam time. So we thought that was the ideal opportunity to work together to launch an event, to create an event.
So our article really goes through like how we started the collaboration, but also just kind of recognizing that collaboration is something that is expected in all types of libraries. You know, from our prior experiences in libraries other than academic ones, we know that this is something that people are doing, but there's, you know, it's hard to find some guidance and some recommendations. So we thought we would share our experience and what we've learned and kind of what we do to grow in our collaborative efforts. And so our article really spans over a few semesters of us really building our de-stressing program by building partnerships and building relationships and really getting to more integrative collaboration and not just kind of a cooperation of sorts. And so in the article, we offer some tools that we've used to collaborate with different entities on campus, but also just some questions, some more reflective questions of like how to get started, how to continue to grow efforts to support students. So we kind of talk about what we did, but also provide some things that we continuously do as we think about and reflect our programming. So I think that's it for us. Lili, any?
And we're just continuing that in this COVID era and trying to think of ways we can move our efforts online. So we're just seeing what everyone else is doing and trying to adapt to our students' needs.
Mhm. Thanks for having us.
Great. Thank you, everyone, for providing those very detailed descriptions of your articles. We are actually on time, which is not something I can say about most things that I attend, let alone when they're held in digital format. So thank you, everyone, for keeping the time. Now what we're going to do is we're going to open up kind of the floor for a conversation for our panelists to have them talk with one another and hopefully ask each other some questions or respond to some of the issues that each one of you may have raised in your papers. And I think in order to kind of get the ball rolling on that, not to put so much pressure on our panelists here to start that process, I had a question that I think would I don't know, that all of you could probably speak to. It specifically comes from something that Jessica had just said, talking about the significance of building relationships and partnerships and building collaborative networks with people in your community so that you have successful outreach and engagement programs. And I was hoping that each one of you might speak to that process a little bit. What did you find in your experience that you think made for really facilitated your ability to develop those kind of collaborative networks? What worked, maybe what didn't work, and what are some of the struggles that you encountered in that process, but also what were some of the techniques or approaches that you took that you found to be successful? So any aspect of that question, I think, would be something that would be appealing to all of us here. And
I think, hi, this is Lili. I think one aspect we found with some of the partners that we worked with were that they had held programs in the past but had low attendance. And what we were able to offer was that our library was always full of students. So we were able to bridge the gap for them and say, if you would like to work with us, we can provide a space where we always get a lot of students and, you know, you have this great program. So let's work together. You bring your expertise and your materials and we'll provide a space where we typically get a lot of students coming in the building throughout the day. So that was a good way to initiate the conversation and to seek others who are also trying to reach students, but weren't sure how to reach a lot of students for their programs.
And I think just building relationships is important, just getting to know what people do, even if that doesn't move itself into a full collaborative effort that's fully integrated. It's, you know, meeting people. I've met so many people where, you know, it's a lot of conversations and maybe nothing will materialize this year, but I hope that they see that the library is we want to work with people. So as far as like the failed attempts, it can be a lot of conversations where nothing really materializes, or, you know, it takes a lot of effort to have one cooperation of a space, but the idea is to build that over time in order to meet common goals. So I think just continuing to build on relationships and let people know what you do and that you care.
thank you very much. Did anyone else have any thoughts on how to build collaborative relationships with members of your community, or some of the things that have worked in your experience and maybe some of the challenges that you face?
Yeah, I can add a little bit more to my opening kind of statement, where I did kind of talk a little bit about, you know, how we fit and work with the departments and programs and organizations. And we go into this a little bit deeper into the article, but, you know, there is a real need that people are searching for in terms of kind of digital persistence and preservation. And they've naturally turned towards the libraries, looking for that assistance and that role. And it's the right thing for them to have done. And it's based on previous experience, right? Because libraries in general kind of are seen as places where people can go to find things that they know exist and maybe have a difficult time finding on their own. And that kind of permanence that's associated with libraries and with archives, has really helped build those kind of collaborations. And so, and some of these departments we've worked with over the years, over the decades, really, in terms of kind of print materials and paper materials and archival materials. And so it's been a real natural fit to move that into the digital world, both on our own campus, but we're also seeing, in our article talks a little bit about how libraries in general are perceived to be trustworthy and authentic, and to be able to provide those types of services. And I think when we now reach out and with our existing partners, and when we start working with new partners, that's where we kind of start our conversation, is kind of talking about that resource and that experience that we have to bring to them. And they kind of often show relief that that's something that they don't have to provide.
I can speak to that. I think if we hadn't had the support from the top down, it would have been much more difficult to accomplish the programming that we did. But our dean was very supportive. She, like I said earlier, she put this before the board. And we did have a problem, kind of working with the history department. And then it was not until the board member who had a good relationship with someone who is quite prominent at UNC Charlotte that we were able to actually work together. So, those collaborations and those relationships are very important. And also our staff, we open that up to everybody on staff, not just faculty. And so anybody who had an interest, and there was a lot of interest, and that, it's something that people were passionate about. And so that was, when you're working with people who have a passion for something, then it's really not work at all.
Great, thank you. Mara actually just sent me a question that I think is very interesting. It speaks more to the writing side of things, which has, and she asks, for the people that did co-author articles, how did you identify your collaborator? Some of you spoke about that briefly, but then how did you actually work together to manage writing a piece that had a unified voice and that felt cohesive and coherent? How did you come together to actually write the piece? And so if anyone has any experience with that and wants to speak to the issue of working with one of your colleagues on actually creating the submission, we'd like to hear your thoughts on that topic.
Well, I can speak to that. Susan's not here. But when we first started out, I was asking her to edit the article. And she's someone I've known, and she's a former journalist and has reads all the time. She's she's a good writer, and she did not leave any holes barred. She was not trying to be she just let me know where I needed to make changes and what didn't work. And so many of those changes that she recommended were, I used like verbatim, that, I thought that she deserved more than just an editorial spot, but she deserved being co-author. So it's a little different, than collaborating with, like some of the other guys here have done.
I was just going to say, since Renee and I work on a regional campus, it's a pretty close-knit staff, so it was a natural fit. but also in terms of the writing and the collaborating. Since we work with colleagues at other campuses, being remote was kind of, we're used to working that way. We're used to collaborating, using shared documents and online messaging and all those sorts of things. So it just was a natural fit in that way as well, that we were already sort of comfortable using those kinds of tools. Renee, I don't know if you wanted to add anything.
I guess I'll just add finding somebody that you write well with is good. Because I think Beth had mentioned her co-author was a journalist. Kelly was a journalist before she became a librarian. So I'm very good at writing very flowy, wonderful literature type, things, and Kelly is very good at editing half of my words out. So, finding somebody that you can do that with is also helpful.
Just to add on, so my co-authors are people I work with closely almost every day, and so our natural and ability to communicate and connect throughout the pandemic, which carried over fairly easily, and I think this has also been, as I kind of started with, a conversation we've been having for several years. So the article itself is more or less kind of a formulation of this long and this ongoing conversation. And we had several examples. We cut some examples out. We brought in different examples. We reacted to the peer reviewer comments and rewrote sections of the article based on that. So in some ways, this is just like a snapshot in time for us with this conversation and with this work that we're doing. We during the writing process, we were also talking about what else we would want to write about and say in a follow-up article as well.
Okay, before I invite you all to perhaps ask each other some questions, we have one more, and oh no, we have a couple more here. So I'll just go ahead and ask them here. Mara asks, what are some of the pressing issues in outreach and engagement that you'd like to see written about? And what are some of the critical conversations we should be having? I would sort of piggyback on that particular question and maybe ask specifically about the journal. What might be some directions that you think we would want to explore, or how can we sort of expand our own outreach so that we are engaged with librarians all over the world, so that we're able to represent those particular issues in a coherent and cohesive way that is appealing to people. So if anyone has any thoughts on that particular topic, we'd love to hear them.
So I guess I'll answer, and this might not exactly be what you're looking for. But one of the things that I've been thinking about and listening to everybody talk about community engagement, we're the University of Pittsburgh, but we're at this branch campus at Greensburg. Greensburg is relatively small, and there's already 3 colleges in this really small area. So I think for me, I would like to try to think about how you can do community engagement when there's already 2 to 3 other colleges in this really small area. Like, how do you get involved with the community when Seton Hill is here, and they're basically taking over the city. they're revitalizing, and their buildings are there. So it would be interesting to me to think about how a smaller college like us could do outreach and get involved in the community.
I think for me personally, I'd really like to hear how people are grappling with outreach virtually. It's just something that we'll try things and they'll fail, which is helpful. But knowing that Zoom fatigue is a real thing. And, we relied so much on our library, like the space to have an audience and kind of using that to reach out. We're personally, trying to think, how do we do this, that we get administrative approval, that it's safe and that's okay to do. And, we're allowing that during a time when we're limiting so much, personal interaction and trying to be a unique, uh, well, not unique, but we're trying to do some outreach here ourselves. So I'm just curious to see what people are doing and what is working.
And I think building on the community idea that Renee brought up, we've also started working with public libraries in our area. And I would be interested to hear how other universities and colleges, if they do have a relationship with public library systems in the area. I know, Beth, you said you worked with the public library to host your program. So I'd be interested in hearing more about those sorts of relationships between academic and public libraries.
Yeah, I agree with Lili. That was what I was thinking about, seeing more of how that is being handled. In our personal experience, we worked with one branch, and it was someone that, already had a relationship with, so it was, fairly easy to work with. But we're right now, our library is trying to do more collaboration with the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Library at large. So I think that would be something interesting to read about, how others are doing, or are others doing that.
And to put my my other hat on, which is as a university archivist, I think that there would be a great opportunity to kind of market the journal to archives and the archives profession, and really try to draw in some of the work that's happening with community archives and with relationships that archives, both academic, historical society, and public archives have with the communities that they both serve and document, and how that changing conversation is happening in terms of, rather than taking from the community and bringing it into the archive, having a more shared relationship with that. I think there's a lot of stories out there that would be appropriate and would fit within the mission of the journal.
Great, thank you so much. Speaking of Zoom fatigue, Jessica brought that up. I think I'm so Zoom fatigued that I actually forgot to introduce myself at the beginning of this webinar. So I apologize to that for our panelists. But I think you probably know I am, given that we published your work. So I don't feel too bad about that, hopefully. Everything is okay. I think that you all speak to a really interesting question, which is so much of outreach and engagement is about building interpersonal relationships with people, and the sort of like physical and materiality of that, of really working with other people. And that's a challenge right now when you don't get to see them. And so what does outreach and engagement look like when you can't actually be physically with the people that you're supposed to be engaging, or with whom you're supposed to be doing the outreach? That's certainly a challenge. We have a couple more questions that are quick enough, I think, and they're not related explicitly, but they're not unrelated. So I'm going to ask them kind of both, and just invite panelists to reflect on any one of them. And the first question has to do with difficulties that you may have experienced in conducting your research, whether or not it was kind of developing an appropriate research methodology or a research question. What were some of the challenges that you may have experienced in the actual research process? And then we are also curious to know what it is that you're working on now. You've already published in the journal, presumably you're onto another project or interested in doing something or writing about something in the future? What can we expect from you down the line? And anyone is free to jump in and answer that when you have an answer.
Well, I'll start. Mine wasn't a research article, so that's not going to apply to me. But as far as what I'm thinking about, and then the pandemic put a big whammy on this, is that we had planned on having a collaboration between the library and the Department of Music and our archives, and we were going to like kind of talk about a different a part of Charlotte's history, LGBTQ history, and relate music to it. So that was all planning on being held in person. So is that something that we can do in Zoom? I guess we could do it, but it's like you said, Zoom fatigue. Who wants to go to another Zoom meeting? So, that's kind of in what's on my plate right now.
Thanks, Beth. Anyone else have any thoughts about difficulties doing the research, or want to share what they are either working on now or hope to work on in the future?
I think Lili and I just constantly try to grapple with like, how can we do our jobs? And so I think we've tried different things this semester. We're currently working on, promoting a coloring book that was made at our university press and trying to get that out to students. So this semester we've been working a lot with social media, but I wouldn't say that we have ours was not a research article. And but it's just mainly trying to really think through how to reach out with being limited. We don't have a social media team. We don't have an outreach committee or event planner, so it's really just trying to think about how do we get to students. And so I think social media we've learned a lot this semester, and trying different things to promote. So we'll see.
And I just want to add that, this summer we weren't able to hold our library orientations that we would normally do for incoming students. So we've been trying to figure out a way to have a virtual library orientation and to see what that would look like. I mean, I don't know that students want to sit there and watch a 5-minute video on how to search for books. So we're trying to think of our audience and plan a more engaging way to introduce the library so that when students do come to campus, they're more familiar with it and will feel that the library is a welcoming space for them.
So some of the work that I'm working on right now is looking at podcasts that are produced at the University of Minnesota and podcast preservation. And this relates back to the repository, because what we are seeing is that podcasts are very ephemeral in nature, and long-term access to them is questionable. And there was referred to as kind of like the golden age of podcasts, which was about 10 years ago. And we saw that kind of die off, and most of those are inaccessible today. And so we're looking at how to bring in podcasts into the IR, kind of for long-term preservation, not necessarily for primary access, but for preservation purposes. And that relates to kind of public engagement, because, if we think about our quarantine and our time at home and the pandemic, how much information and how much news and community development there has been that's been pushed through podcasts as a format. And so, looking at all the new podcasts, all the podcasts that change their formats, all the news reporting that's happened through podcasts at the university, and which ones are responding specific to the pandemic, those which have responded specifically to the murder of George Floyd, and being able to capture that content as part of the repository as again a way that we can fulfill a kind of a common good for those who are producing the podcasts.
We have been working on different proposals related to continuing to reach students during COVID. Specifically, we've been trying to sort of add on to existing Canvas course materials, modules that instructors can use. We did incorporate a little photo tour into that to just give students an idea if they weren't on campus. So I echo everyone's comments about the difficulty with Zoom because students are already expected to do a lot on Zoom. So wherever we can kind of sneak in, that's what we've been trying to do, just to not overwhelm. And we're looking into explaining that in more depth and possibly pursuing that as one of our future projects.
Great. Last but not least, does anyone have any questions? Do any of you have any questions for each other?
I had a question coming from the article for Renee and Kelly about their engagement with faculty and faculty recognition. There was a lot in your article that I could empathize with and feel like I've lived some of that experience in terms of working with faculty and whether or not we're trying to recruit specific faculty works to the repository, but faculty are also part of these research centers and other organizations that we're working with to bring in content. But I thought it was interesting that your real life findings of trying to draw, to get information about faculty works for the recognition, that you were more successful when you had somebody kind of coordinating that and feeding you information than you were just trying to rely on the individual faculty to deliver it to you. And I was curious if because I think you've now done this twice, if your second time through, were you able to use your original model completely, or do you still have a mix of faculty bringing things to you directly versus the chairs?
So this year would have been the third year. So the last 2 years, we've worked with the division chairs to get us the information, and they have been more than happy to provide it to us. This past year, because it was online, we actually sent a preview to our faculty and asked them if anything was missing. And there were some things that weren't on that list that they did provide to us afterwards. So that was helpful in that sense. But the division chairs have been really great. They all send us the information differently. Some send links, some just give us the citation. But it's been a lot better since we've worked with them and they get it to us.
And I think too, the fact that we had the first event and some of the faculty were made aware of the fact that the division chairs were the ones who were sending them the information. When we have the second event, the response from the division chairs, I think, also opened the door for some of the faculty who knew it was being planned to just kind of, we did get a couple people who said, oh, I did this, or did they include that? So
sure,
that was helpful too.
Leveraging the inherent competition. Great, thank you.
Okay, I think we have time for maybe one more question, if anyone has one. Okay, I won't belabor the point or go fishing. So on that note, I would like to thank all of our panelists. This was truly an honor and a privilege to be able to publish your work. We are very grateful for your participation in this panel today. I know that as editors of this journal and how we can improve it and make it better and expand our audience, we've definitely got a lot of ideas as to how we can go about doing that in the future. And I would like to thank each and every one of you for giving us more food for thought in that regard. This is really an opportunity, I think. I think one of the things that struck me about everyone's articles is that you all have identified a need in your community and have tried to build responses to that need in a very thoughtful way. And that's really kind of behind the mission of this journal, is that we identified a need within existing library scholarship to be able to represent the work that people are doing in the areas of outreach engagements in its multifarious forms, and to really provide a stable location for that work to be represented and for people to access. So we're just delighted that you are first authors and that you have joined this journey at the very beginning. We look forward to seeing what you have to do in the future, and we wish you nothing but safe and health during this this challenging time. So thank you very much. And with that, I will conclude our first authors panel.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thanks.
goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.